So what would you do as commander-in-chief if the U.S. military refused to carry out those orders?
They won't refuse. They're not going to refuse me, believe me.
But they're illegal.
Let me just tell you, you look at the Middle East, they're chopping off heads. They're chopping off the heads of Christians and anybody else that happens to be in the way. We should go for waterboarding, and we should go tougher than waterboarding.
But targeting terrorist families?
And I'm a leader. I'm a leader. I've always been a leader. I've never had any problem leading people. If I say do it, they're going to do it. That's what leadership is all about.
Joining us now, former presidential candidate, former Democratic senator from the great state of Virginia, Jim Webb, also a United States combat veteran. Senator, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So just let's start with a broad question. State of the race. What you saw last night.
Oh, that. Oh, my goodness.
How are you feeling about the future of American politics right now, sir?
I think I'm like an average American, very confused and hoping that we can get through this with the president who can articulate the future of the country in a proper way. And actually, if I might say something about what Eric Fleischer said, I don't know that don't know Donald Trump. I don't know that Donald Trump would be asking him for advice, but I would think that there is a time in this campaign where he should stand up and make a major policy speech rather than simply participating in these debates. And the situation with the KKK is a classic example. If you look at what Barack Obama went through with Jeremy Wright, when his minister, he'd gone to that church for 20 years, he'd made some really inflammatory statements, and Obama chose that moment to make a policy speech about the importance of resolving race issues in America. And I think if there were one piece of advice that I would give Donald Trump, if I knew Donald Trump, it would be, instead of just doing these debates, find one of these issues and make a major policy speech so people can see how you're going to communicate if you're president.
Senator, as a veteran yourself, I want to ask you on one specific bit of the debate last night where Donald Trump was asked what he would do if people in the military refused to target families, for example, of terrorists or go beyond waterboarding. And he said they wouldn't. They'll listen to me. I guarantee you they'll do what I say. Will they?
There's a thing called the law, and if you are receiving an illegal order, you do not obey, and you have the moral authority not to obey. If that were the situation, the difficulty that I have when I look at all of the presidential candidates right now is that I'm not seeing the sort of articulation of a foreign policy concept that would communicate to the rest of the world how America will address its national security interests. We really have not had that sort of a clear policy since the end of the Cold War, and that's how we have been anecdotally or incident by incident looking at what we do around the world. And it's really affecting us not only in the Middle East, but also in East Asia with these issues with an expansionist China.
But just to clarify, if you're a soldier out in the field and you get an order that tells you to go kill family members of an enemy combatant, you just don't do it.
You have a duty to disobey. Yeah. I represented a so-called war criminal, a young Marine named Sam Green, pro bono for 6 years on this very issue of what do you do if you receive an order that is beyond the moral authority of the person to give it. And my guy actually obeyed an order and was convicted of murder. And 3 years into this incident, when I was representing him, 3 years into it, he killed himself. He took his own life. I cleared his name 3 years later.
So presumably, for putting aside the question of obeying orders, presumably for Donald Trump to be out there saying that we should go way beyond waterboarding, that we should kill the families of these terrorists, et cetera, is kind of the height of irresponsibility?
Well, the most important thing that a president can do when it comes to military policy is to get his senior military leaders or her senior military leaders at the table and discuss these things and get their advice and then make a decision. And that's not just a Donald Trump issue. That's all of an issue, all of these people's issues. And if you don't have a clearly stated foreign policy and if you don't have a broad experience in this area, of foreign policy, and we only have one candidate who has broad experience, and she's been wrong on every issue since 9/11, then you sort of default into the aristocracy, this incestuous bureaucracy that controls how we go about our foreign policy.
Senator, a lot of people have been saying online and sending emails when they found out you were going to be on that they wanted you to consider jumping in as an independent in this race and saving them from the horror that they see the coming general election setting up to be. Would you consider, under any circumstances, running an independent bid?
We looked at this very hard for 3 months when I withdrew from the Democratic primary process, and it's a very costly process to get on the ballot in all of the different states. It's very litigious. I think when Ralph Nader did this, there were 29 lawsuits from the DNC alone came at him. If you had the money, if you were Michael Bloomberg with the money, it's conceivable. But it's a very difficult process to do.
You just said a second ago, Senator, that Hillary Clinton has been wrong on every foreign policy issue since 9/11. You were in the race against her. You expressed all those things. Would you have enough reservation about Hillary Clinton as a commander-in-chief that you would not support her for president?
I'm not supporting anybody right now.
Would you vote for Hillary Clinton?
No, I would not vote for Hillary Clinton.
Would you vote for Donald Trump?
I'm not sure yet. I don't know who I'm going to vote for.
No.
But not Hillary Clinton?
No, I don't. Look, and this is nothing personal about Hillary Clinton, but I think the reason that Donald Trump is getting so much support right now is not because of racists, et cetera, et cetera. It's because people are seeing him, a certain group of people are seeing him as the only one who has the courage to step forward and say, we've got to clean out the stables of the American governmental system right now. We've got to make it work. And if you're voting for Donald Trump, you may get something very good or very bad. If you're voting for Hillary Clinton, you're going to be getting the same thing. Do you want the same thing? 6% of the people in the country maybe want the same thing.
All right, Jim Webb, thank you so much.
Thanks,
It's always
Senator.
great to have you here.